Three of the most famous words in the Bible are in the beginning. In Hebrew, Beresheet bara Elohim. And to help us understand, Hebrew does not read like the English does, left to right. Hebrew reads right to left. But what if we're missing something very important? What if God put something or used a method in relaying this story to mankind that we've often overlooked? Maybe we're looking at this from a Western English concept where the letters in the beginning are what we grasp. But what if there's something deeper? When we begin to look at the Hebrew language, we realize that Hebrew is not just made up with letters. We have, and you're going to recognize these, we have our ABCs. And to us, they're letters. The A doesn't mean anything. It's just a letter. It's not until we combine the A with other letters do we get, and pity my drawings, we get a picture, but it has to combine letters. But in Hebrew, there's something else. Hebrew, each letter is a picture. Each letter is telling something that is bigger, a more broader concept, and the combining of pictures allows us to have deeper meaning. Do you want to take a guess what picture God thought was the most important to start this story of creation? What image do you think he would choose in doing this? When we start looking at the Hebrew text, we realize something right away. God does not start with the very first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. He doesn't start with the Aleph, which in picture is the picture of an ox. Typically, it means God, authority, one. All of that is the first, but he doesn't do that. He starts with the second letter. Some of these characters in Hebrew, some of these pictures, I absolutely love. This one is a shepherd's staff, meaning leadership or guidance or leading sheep, just as a shepherd would. But my favorite is one that you'll probably recognize, the universal symbol, and it's the hay. It's literally a guy standing there with his arms raised. And today we see that as don't shoot. But then it was have mercy. It's bowing. It's show grace to me. And each one of these letters is vitally important in understanding what picture this is in its language. So when we start to look at the Hebrew in the very first word, the very first letter, we recognize that this is the bait. And this is an image of, and it'll take us a little bit to understand this, of a Bedouin tent, the floor plan of a Bedouin tent. And you'll see it as it progresses through history over the thousands of years. It changes, it evolves, and you'll see it show up like this. Sometimes it will even progress even further, and it'll be more like that. When it starts to go towards the Latin versions in history, you'll see it more like that, which later turns into the English alphabet of the letter B. But in Hebrew, it evolved until we got to this idea of the bait. And this image means house. The very first picture that God wanted to use in telling the story of creation is, this is about the Father's house. Do you think that's an important image that God's trying to get across? Saying this whole creation, the Beresheet bara Elohim at Hashemayim va'at ha'aretz. This, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. This is beginning and is talking about the Father's house, the place where God dwells. And in the Garden of Eden, we see that, where God walks with man and man can fellowship with him and have relationship with God. And the very first picture is laying out that concept. And you'll see this all throughout the Hebrew text with the image of house. It'll talk about the house or the house of Jacob. You'll see it mentioned, or the house and lineage of David. We will also see it in town names. You'll see it, one you'll recognize right away, with the Beit or Beth Lechem. And it just means house of Lechem, house of bread. And we see that Christ, the bread of the world, is born in Bethlehem, a bakery. Where else would bread be created? And Christ, the bread of the world, is born in Bethlehem in the house of bread. So we see that this is a beautiful picture about God's house. But what about the rest of this? What about this Resheet? What does that mean? And you'll see there that the second letter is the Rosh or the Resh. We see that in the Jewish holiday, Rosh Hashanah, which is the beginning of their new year. It literally means head. And we see that in his house is this Resheet. And you will see that Adam is mentioned as the Resheet, the head or the first, where he is the first of the house. And it also comes up when we look at Israel is called in Psalms, is called his first. We see Christ as the Messiah being referenced as Resheet. And you can do a word study on that if you want, the Resheet in the Bible. The one that I really love, Christ is there, but it also says in Revelation that we have been redeemed as believers to be his Resheet. So you begin to realize that in God's house, this place that God is creating is where God's people, his partners, live. And this story is about his household and how they interact with this creation and what this creation and why it's been created. And you begin to realize that there's a purpose of this creation, that we're supposed to be living with God as his partner in his house of creation. When you start studying this concept of Beresheet and this first letter in the Hebrew Bible, you realize that the rabbis have talked about this. There's a lot of ancient writings that they've come up with. And one thing that I found that I really love in this concept of this house is they saw that this letter is directional. And they made this comment that said, you have to realize that creation is directional. It's not talking about things that came before. There's no words in front of the first word of the Bible. There's no details. We don't understand what happened before creation. He says, this is not the story of things that happened before creation. Nor is it something that talks about things that are above creation. This is the story of this heaven and earth that God created for his household. Nor it doesn't talk about things that are below creation. We don't understand what's going below this story of creation. But it is directional. It is saying that this household, this story of God's creation is standing with an open door. And this very first character of the Bible is an open door telling us that this household is to go forward into this story. It's a call to go forward into this creation, to find your purpose, to find the meaning of life is going to be in these words. And it's an adventure. It's calling us to go to this. It's calling us to step into the text and to understand what he's trying to tell in this story. And it awaits us. It's as if the call is happening, the door is standing open, and are we going to step into it? Are we going to step into the story, find our purpose, find our understanding, and ultimately return back into the Father's house? Because right there, we can walk with God. As it talks about Adam, in the cool of the day, he walks with them and talks with them because they dwell as partners in God's creation in the Father's house. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a comment. I would love to hear what you think. Until next time, keep studying the text because in it is the adventure, is the story of his creation.